Good evening, I'm Jeff Glor in Wilmington, North Carolina, and this is a special edition of the CBS Evening News. The rain will barely let up here on this coast for another 24 hours. The preliminary rainfall totals from Florence are staggering. The National Weather Service says more than 30 inches of rain was measured in Swansboro, North Carolina. That shatters the state's tropical system rainfall record of more than 24 inches set during Hurricane Floyd in 1999. Officials warn some rivers are approaching historic flood levels, and the worst of it may still be to come. The death toll from Florence climbed today to at least 12. Some have been killed by fallen trees. Others have died on flooded roads. Nearly 1 million homes and businesses in the Carolinas have lost power. Today, the mayor of Wilmington told us it could take weeks to restore all electricity to this city. President Trump and Vice President Pence receive updates on the storm at the White House today. The president plans to travel here sometime soon. We have a team of correspondents covering this disaster. We're going to begin tonight with Adriana Diaz and the massive rescue operation in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Adriana?
Jeff, despite a mandatory evacuation order in Jacksonville, many people decided to stay home, and that means some people saw these floodwaters rise around them. Crews that were supposed to be out on the street collecting debris had to be rerouted to help with rescue efforts. Volunteers brought boats, and federal air support was called in. Coast Guard helicopters flew through rain to reach people today in homes too remote for rescue boats. We watched as guardsmen were deployed to the ground.
Have you been pulling people from homes, from roofs?
Yeah, just people that flag us down really need help.
Most evacuations were by boat. We found this family looking for any neighbors who might need help.
Man, it was pretty quick. I woke up till it was about halfway up the street, and about 2 hours later, we was worried about it coming into our house.
The National Guard, first responders, and volunteers rescued dozens of people who live in low-lying areas of Onslow County.
Hello!
Where the worst flooding is chest deep. Callie Sterling lives in a dry part of the county, but rushed here to help.
What does it look like back there? It's pretty deep. It's scary. There's cars already going under. There's people freaking out.
Some brought what they could in shopping bags.
You're okay.
Others cradled wet pets to safety. This scene is just a slice of Florence's assault on the Carolinas. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper.
The water is rising fast everywhere, even in places that don't typically flood. Many people who think that the storm has missed them have yet to see its threat.
That's why Anthony Love's family is leaving. They've been here for 2 decades, and this is their first time fleeing the floodwater.
This is the worst it's ever been. Luckily, we don't have any water in our house, but it's getting close.
We've never seen this before. Never, never, never. Not like this. So that's something, that's going to be like for the history books.
This rain is expected to continue for days, which means more risk of flooding. In fact, a curfew that already lifted will be reimposed tonight at 9 p.m. until 7 a.m. tomorrow. Officials don't want anyone out on the streets when they can't see well because of the flooding, because of downed power lines, and also with no power in this area, there are no street lights. Jeff?
Adriana, thank you very much.
The winds are still whipping here. When I talked to you from Atlantic Beach, we had to egress and come back to Moorhead to our safe position. If you look, the water surge is starting to really pick up. And across from this bay is Atlantic Beach taking that beating. It became too treacherous over there. We could not stay there. The streets of Moorhead, a few hours ago, we drove down them to give our viewers a shot, but it is just business after business, tree after tree blown away. You can see the street sign, North 4th Street. Street signs flying like a piece of weapon. That's the street we're on. We saw it when we went around the corner. And so one thing that is of concern here in Moorhead City is when you watch this storm surge come up, because we're getting close to high tide, closer and closer, this is going to spill into the streets, which are already getting flooding from the excessive rainfall, into flooding on Highway 70, which is really about 200 to 300 yards. Directly in front of me is the main thoroughfare to go inland to many of those other cities like New Bern, where we are seeing the rescues because of the flooding caused by the rivers. Those 4 rivers, the Neuse River, the Newport River, the Pamlico River, the Trent River, all coming down with water it cannot hold because it's cresting in some places in unprecedented levels coming down here. While this water event continues to just pound us, as Bill was saying, the northeast quadrant, this is called the dirty side. It's just pounded us. The wind has not changed its direction since 2 o'clock this morning when I started going live. It's coming straight through here because we are parallel to Atlantic Beach, a barrier island. It's a funnel, and it's just whipping us. And what's amazing is that even though it went from a Category 4 to Category 2 to now a Category 1, these winds are quite significant. And as we saw across Atlantic Beach, the pier there, the Oceana Pier, was literally split in half, the end of it floating away. No idea where that is. And when you talk about when this does clear, and you've got to get in here with first responders, entire gas stations, 2 on the main highway of Morehead, on the 3 or 4 mile drive over to Atlantic Beach, were already flattened. And then when you got across the bridge to Atlantic Beach, the first gas station that came through also crashed as conditions continue to really pound us here, Sandra.
And it may only be the beginning, Griff. Morehead City, North Carolina, incredibly powerful winds that you continue to experience there. You know, we just heard from that FEMA update, NOAA talking as well, that this could continue to track the coast for the next 24 to 36 hours. And of course, the dire forecasts are about that storm surge. Griff, it's hard to even watch you out there. I just want you to get to safety. I mean, it is blowing, and it's tough to imagine what that feels like. If you could just share that with us.
Well, it's very intense, Sandra, and here's the real concern, and that is, as we saw when I was across at Atlantic Beach, the power lines in these small coastal communities, all the power lines are above ground. And whether it's trees or whatnot that pulls the power lines down, you've got power lines down everywhere. And if we have 24 hours of this kind of sustained wind activity, it is going to be a significant and debilitating situation that makes it very, very difficult for people, particularly first responders and law enforcement, to get around in it. Certainly the chief of police over in Atlantic Beach and the fire chief I'm talking to, they've gone back into protective mode because you can't be out in this and not put people's lives in danger.
Griff, it's amazing you're bringing us live television in those elements. We thank you for that. Please be safe.
Now, officials in North Carolina are urging residents at this stage not to let their guards down as Hurricane Florence approaches. This storm is bringing sustained winds of 110 miles per hour. It could also bring a storm surge of up to 15 feet in some areas, which is just incredible. And in addition to that, dump up to 30 inches of rain. Adriana Diaz met one man in Jacksonville, North Carolina, who decided to ride out this storm on the water. Here's what he told her.
So you're worried that if you left your boat alone, it would get destroyed?
Correct. That's one thing us captains don't do, is we don't run for the hills. We like to stay with our assets, you might as well say.
But this is a life-threatening storm. This could cost you your life.
Yeah, it could, but you know, when you're a licensed captain, you're experienced for these kind of problems, you know, situations. So you just stick with your boat.
I imagine a lot of people are telling you not to do this.
Oh yeah. A few people told me I was crazy, but like I said, this ain't my first rodeo. I've done this before.
And Adriana Diaz joins us now from on the waters there in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Adriana, does Captain James have any experience in conditions like this?
Errol, he does. He said he has done this before. He said, quote, this is not his first rodeo. He rode out Hurricanes Fran, Floyd, and Bertha all on a boat. He's a tour boat captain, so he owns tour boats. His other tour boats are out here also anchored. He just wants to be close to those boats so he can keep an eye on them. He plans to steer this yacht into the storm to keep it steady as the winds are blowing away, direct it so that it can be as steady as possible. Otherwise, the boat's really on its own. It's got anchors that are down, but he is worried that that may not be enough.
And Adriana, this is an incredible shot because we can see even the birds in the distance behind you having a tough time fighting against the winds. Does the captain that you've been speaking to have a plan if conditions get much worse and become life-threatening?
He said if it's unbearable, if it's life-threatening, he's just going to come out here, jump in the water, and swim to shore. But he's pretty confident that it's not going to get that bad. I said, you're willing to swim through hurricane waters? He said he'll do whatever it takes, and he says that he is pretty good at floating.
And we wouldn't advise, of course, anyone to take that same risk, but, you know, that's his.
Author and peace activist Ryan Dawson joins us now from Osaka with more on that story. Mr. Dawson, what do you make of this recent so-called multinational coalition by the United States against sanctions on North Korea?
Yes, it's a very expensive move, which is very easily thwarted. They're going to have this multinational policing of the waters to try mainly to stop illegal oil imports to North Korea. Coal imports are coming by land mostly. But it's very easy to skirt these sanctions. The Chinese usually, the government can order banks not to process finances for these trades, but trading companies simply use third parties like Singapore and other nations not subject to the sanctions, and they act as a middleman to continue the flow of oil into the black market for North Korea. So it's very expensive for them to try and police something that is fairly easily gotten around and by old methods. And so they would need something like secondary sanctions, and it's just not possible. It's so easy to break up a cartel. So if they really want to resolve things with North Korea, they need to find something better than threatening with sanctions like they've been doing for 40 years.
That's exactly where I was going next. With moves like this, how do the Americans expect to get North Korea back at the negotiating table?
I don't think that's the purpose of the move. The purpose of the move is to increase the naval budgets for all the countries involved. They're happy about that, and they can use North Korea as a pretext to justify budgetary spending on policing waters against sanctions. But simply, China is going to use third-party flags and just go in legally by using middlemen through their trading companies, the same way that Israel got oil out of Iran and Iraq through Glencore when there were sanctions there. They just used third parties. It's an easy trick and tactic, but a lot of people don't dig very deep when there's sanctions, and they don't understand the nature of black markets. But North Korea is still going to come to the table. I mean, they're getting fuel because they have to, and they don't mind, you know, what China is going to do. But they're still going to come to the table because they're very interested in changing their economy and welcoming capitalism. It's over for them. They got nuclear weapons just so they could bargain them away. And they are saying recently they want to do this, and Moon was saying from South Korea as well, they want to try to get this over with during Trump's first term, because there might not be a second term.
Ryan Dawson joining us from Osaka. Thank you, sir.
На приеме.
The Saudi-led coalition launched airstrikes on a bus station on Wednesday as they try to gain control of key areas from Houthi rebels. RT's correspondent Dan Cohen has the story.
Just one day after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo certified that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are taking steps to reduce civilian casualties, missiles struck a bus station near Hodeidah Airport. A warning to viewers, these images of the aftermath are graphic. Reports say at least 16 people are dead and 23 are injured, many of them civilians. It's just the latest attack in what the United Nations has called the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. This comes weeks after the coalition bombed 2 buses full of children in separate incidents, leading to renewed criticism of U.S. involvement in the war. On Tuesday, Pompeo certified to Congress that the governments of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, quote, are undertaking demonstrable actions to reduce the risk of harm to civilians and civilian infrastructure. Section 1290 of the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act stipulates that the U.S. cannot continue to refuel Saudi and Emirati warplanes without the Secretary of State's certification that they're taking steps to reduce the civilian toll. And the latest attack raises major questions about what measures Pompeo claims Saudi Arabia and the UAE are taking. Congressman Mark Pocan had harsh words for Pompeo, saying the Secretary of State made a mockery of the law by certifying that Saudi Arabia, which bombs and starves Yemeni civilians with U.S. participation, is actually reducing casualties, and said he, along with Congressmen Ro Khanna and Adam Smith, will force a House vote to end illegal U.S. involvement in the war. The attack comes as the Saudi-led coalition cut off a supply route between Yemen's capital and Hodeidah, both of which are under Houthi rebel control. As much as 80% of Yemen's food and medicine comes through Hodeidah port, and the coalition's assault has displaced more than 300,000 people since it began on June 13th. That has only exacerbated the crisis in Yemen. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, 22 million Yemenis are food insecure, 1 million are homeless, and half of the country's medical facilities have closed down amid the worst cholera outbreak in human history. According to the charity Save the Children, an average of 140 children have been killed per day since Saudi Arabia and the UAE began bombing Yemen in 2015. Reporting in Washington, Dan Cohen.
Facebook recently revealed that it removed 32 accounts linked to the Russian government. It also removed over 600 accounts linked to Iran. The latter purge came in response to a tip by the cybersecurity firm FireEye, which said the accounts pushed, quote, narratives including anti-Saudi, anti-Israeli, and pro-Palestinian themes, and support for specific U.S. policies favorable to Iran, like the Iran nuclear deal. The activity demonstrates that actors beyond Russia continue to engage in and experiment with online social media influence operations to shape political discourse. In early September, the Senate Intelligence Committee questioned executives from Facebook and Twitter, which also removed Iran-linked accounts, about online foreign influence operations. During the hearing, Vice Chairman Warner said foreign entities are using social media to hijack our national conversation and that disinformation campaigns weaken American discourse. Jesse, social media now behaves like mainstream media. It's simply a tool of the establishment. All the concern laid out in these examples is over the fact that foreign internet campaigns are reducing America's own influence over mass information, don't you think?
Well, I'll tell you something, Brigitte. I always remembered and I thought back, what will the government do to get control of the internet? When the internet first came out, it was virtually pretty much uncontrollable. And government is not going to allow that to happen. Government wants to control everything citizens do. Everything you do has to be licensed. It has to be looked at. Government has to oversee it. And I always wondered how they were going to do this. Now I see the writing on the wall. They're doing it with a great example of fascism. When corporations and government rule the people. That's what you have here now. You've got these corporations which have the right. We've talked about it before. They can allow anything on that they want. They can censor. They have that right to do so. But when they're doing it at the behest of the government, and doing it masquerading, this is what the government doesn't want its people to see. That is outright wrong, and this is the danger. The danger is not that foreign entities are going to enter our cyberspace and we're going to have to deal with it. I look at that as kind of an insult to my intelligence. I need the government to tell me how to be intelligent on the internet, and the first thing I should explain is I don't do the internet, and I've never owned a cell phone. So none of these things are going to influence Jesse Ventura one little bit. As it does many other people, it doesn't influence either. This is simply government attempting to control the internet by controlling and working with the corporations that provide services to the people on the internet. I think that's the dangerous part, more so than what Warner talked about.
In 2017, Bloomberg revealed that Facebook was looking to hire employees with national security clearance to, quote, search more proactively for questionable social media campaigns before elections, mainly by foreign powers. Because the new hires would likely be former government and intelligence officials, they'd still have access to classified information and could therefore tell Facebook what content concerns the American government. Jesse, what do you think about the cozy relationship between the U.S. national security apparatus and Facebook?
I think it's horrible. I mean, why should the U.S. government be so involved with Facebook and controlling what it does? What they're telling us is that they want to control us. Again, I go back to it. The government had to figure out a way to control the internet, and they've figured it out now. They're going to do it through the massive corporations, let them do the dirty work while they stay behind the scenes, and they don't think we're smart enough to see through it. You know, let's go back to this thing about, we'll wait on it. But again, this is, I think what's horrible happening here is the fact that the government is not being out front, and neither are these internet providers as to what they're actually trying to do here.
Facebook's plan comes in response to reports that Russia spent $100,000 on ads during the 2016 presidential election. The author who exposed the plan says the company is likely hiring people with NatSec clearance to prevent the government from directly accessing Facebook's system outright. Facebook would also reportedly need facility clearance so Facebook employees could access government databases that contain classified information on individuals and organizations, and to meet with intelligence officials to review documents. Jesse, when you and I last discussed social media banning Alex Jones, we mentioned the rights of private companies to do so. But when Facebook works hand in hand with the U.S. government, as it's doing here, where is the line between corporate censorship and government censorship?
As I said, Brigitte, this is horrible. This is fascism at its best, because you got Facebook, the gigantic, almost monopolized corporation, is now going to determine what we can get. And they said it's because that $100,000 was spent by Russia prior to the last election. $100,000? Hillary Clinton spent that in one day. Are you kidding me? $100,000 spent on a presidential election is a drop in the proverbial bucket. That ain't nothing. And they're going to tell me this is all over that. Yet the United States, we need to remember something. The United States, according to the Carnegie Mellon Institute, from 1948 to 2010, has interfered in 81 elections in 45 different countries. So it appears manipulating elections seems to be, or attempting to, seems to be the status quo. And how could $100,000 get the job done? It's not going to affect people like me. I don't do the internet. I don't even own a cell phone. So who did it affect? And let's look at how we elect our president here. The Electoral College chooses our president. We don't. Our votes are actually meaningless, because the Electoral College is bound by nothing, and they pick the President of the United States. That's what our war should be on, not on whether Russia took out $100,000 of ads trying to influence our election. They've already determined it had no effect on the election. This is a big red herring to control the public's internet.
Facebook has admitted to removing content and accounts at the requests of the U.S. and Israeli governments. According to The Intercept, the Israeli Justice Minister said at one point Facebook granted 95% of Israel's requests to remove all posts it had labeled incitement. The content mainly belonged to Palestinian activists. If Facebook hadn't complied, Israel threatened to pass laws that would force the company to delete the content or be fined or blocked from the country altogether. Here in the United States, Facebook has heavily lobbied against regulations, which is likely why it works so closely with the American government. The company now appears to be working with Israel to thwart foreign regulations. Politicians keep saying that foreign actors who spread alleged disinformation online are harming our democracy and discourse. But aren't giant corporations with this much power over our information just as harmful, Jesse?
I would think so, Brigida. I would think so, because there's nothing there that says Facebook is telling the truth. And let's remember something. Facebook is now going to be the voice and the thing of our government. How many times has our government lied to us? They lie to us all the time. The big things, they lied about weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda in Iraq. That sent us to war. They lied to us about we're not under any type of surveillance. It turns out we're all under surveillance. So now we're expected to believe our government, who constantly lies to us, and they're going to be the ones controlling what we learn on the internet. We're only going to see their version. We're not allowed to see an alternative version, or the version maybe from the other side of the wall as we build them.
We're going to move now to other news tonight. There was an urgent meeting at the Vatican today. Some of the highest-ranking Catholic leaders from the U.S. met with Pope Francis to discuss the priest-sex abuse crisis that has shaken the church. Seth Doan reports from Rome.
The U.S. bishops said Pope Francis listened deeply from the heart in their discussions today, but they offered few details and no next steps. Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, the head of all U.S. bishops, pushed for this meeting and wants a Vatican investigation into how disgraced former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick rose to the highest levels of the church, despite allegations of sexual misconduct. But now DiNardo himself is accused of allowing a predator priest to remain in his own archdiocese in Texas. In a statement, the archdiocese explained that one of the cases against the accused priest was dropped years ago by the minor's family, and a second case brought last month was taken seriously and reported to authorities. Also today, Bishop Michael Bransfield of West Virginia resigned amid accusations he'd sexually harassed adults. The Vatican announced his resignation while his cousin, Monsignor Brian Bransfield, was in that same meeting with the Pope. With cases piling up, Nora O'Donnell asked FBI Director Christopher Wray if they'd launch a federal investigation into the church.
At what point does this rise to the level of a national investigation where the FBI would get involved?
When we have the facts and we have the law and we have the evidence to support an investigation, there is no institution that we're afraid to investigate, period.
And Jeff, tonight, the Catholic Church in Germany is also in crisis. A church report there found more than 1,600 clerics are accused of abusing more than 3,600 minors in a nearly 70-year period.
All right, Seth Doan in Rome for us. Thanks very much.